He is the director of For Sale, a film now out on VOD. Here he is, Christopher Schrack. Hopefully, I said that right.
You did say that right. How you guys doing?
Well, welcome to the Chris Army. Chris,
Yes.
tell us about your film.
So For Sale is it's an ultra low budget film that took us 3 years to make. It's a horror comedy. To me, it's a comedy with jump scares about a shady salesman that has to sell a haunted house. And it was a labor of love, ultra low budget film that featured a 2, sometimes 3-person crew, and it's out today on digital on demand.
All right. So, how did the story come about? What was your inspiration for it?
The story came about because I spent some years working at a car dealership, and I found myself surrounded by some really interesting and unique personalities. And a lot of, and I'm not saying all salesmen are like this, but the salesman that I worked with, there was an interesting level of do or die hubris that kind of accompanied their personalities. And, the type of person who would go to any lengths to sell something. And sometimes it could be pretty comical. And somewhere during the pandemic, I was trying to find a way to do a feature, an ultra low budget feature, and I had the idea like, well, one of these funny characters had to sell a haunted house. So it kind of married my two, my love for horror films and the idea of putting a comedic element in it to bounce off each other and to just kind of see what would happen.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I assume you wrote it during the pandemic. In terms of what were the things what were the obstacles you had to kind of overcome, or the challenges you faced getting it actually into production?
Well, it was self-funded. So in some ways, self-funding a film makes it easier, but also makes it harder. It makes it easier in the sense that you're not sitting around waiting for investors, which can be a really long portion of the journey of trying to make a film. But it makes it harder because you only have a very small amount of money to play with. So the only way that I've been able to figure out how to make that happen is to just learn to wear as many hats as possible. And so that means not just writing it, but directing it, producing it, doing the cinematography, doing the editing, doing a lot of the visual effects. That way you don't have to pay for obviously all the crew members. So that of course makes it a big challenge. But it was, at least for that moment in time, the only way that I could get it made.
Go ahead, Alan.
No, go ahead.
Well, what were some of the challenges? I mean, that's wearing a lot of hats. That's indie film.
Yeah.
But what were some of the more specific challenges?
I mean, also we had a very small crew. I mean, like I said, it's was sometimes 2 people. Sometimes it was just me running camera and doing lighting, and then my brother who was running sound. And I mean, it's just a huge challenge in the moment, because you might be an actor might be asking you a question while at the same time you're setting up a light or attaching a lens, and at the same time you're getting text messages from tomorrow's location manager, and so you're doing all these things all at the same time. And so in the general sense, it just kind of, it requires you to you got to think producer, director, DP, producer, director, DP. And then the specific challenges were, when you're doing everything yourself, it's not just mentally taxing, but it's emotionally and physically exhausting. The cast is sitting around waiting for you to go, and you're setting up the lights and making sure the camera and everything is properly framed, and then you have to do it all again in between each take. So, again, in certain regards, it makes the process a little quicker, because a traditional crew might take 15 to 20 minutes plus in between setups, and I could do it a little bit faster. But again, when you're doing it all yourself, it's exhausting.
Yeah, well, also tell us about, okay, it's one thing to make the movie. Now you have to release it. What was the journey to finishing the film and then getting a distributor to put it out on VOD, which it's out today?
Yeah, it came out May 7th.
Oh, okay, cool. So it's out and available to rent, buy, whatnot. Tell us about that journey, because that's a whole other animal.
Yeah, that is a whole other animal. I mean, it's funny, making a film, as you guys, I'm sure you know, is like a marathon, and sometimes you kind of feel like you're like, okay, I'm on mile 25, I'm almost done, and then you reach that goal, and you're like, oh no, I'm only halfway done, or I'm only a third of the way done, and so finishing up the film, post-production took a year and a half plus, again, editing myself. And then from there, we did a local premiere to kind of get the feeling out, kind of get some immediate reaction, what kind of things are working, what kind of things are not, what can be adjusted. And then we did a little festival run, which was fun. We got into some cool festivals, we picked up some awards. And then the journey to get it distributed really helps to have a sales agent. And I had worked with a particular sales agent years ago, and got in touch with him, and he was able to get it sold to Gravitas Ventures, and they were able to put it out to all the platforms that's available at today. So Apple TV, Amazon. It's still a big journey, even when you just get distribution, because they send you a 4-page list of all the assets and breakdowns that you need to give to them. Again, you like right then you feel, oh, I got distribution, I'm almost to the end, and then it's like, no, I'm not. I've got another month and a half of work to do, of going through the sound mix. Okay, how do I do a 5.1 surround sound mix? Now I've got to create individual stems of all the audio. I've got to do all these checks. I've got to do all this metadata. So that's an enormous undertaking too. So really, the whole process just kind of feels like it's a never-ending one.
Yeah.
And you just, you just keep going. It's frustrating, but it's just problem solving. The whole thing is making a film is solving 50,000 problems, and you're just like, okay, well, I've solved this many, so what's another few more problems?
And then you have to have your film QA'd, right?
Yes.
Everything's got to be QA'd, the sound, the picture. They don't just let any movie release on VOD. There are certain benchmarks. So.
Yeah, well, so the way the distributor works is that they go through the iTunes QC, which apparently is the most stringent, tough QC that a platform has. And they're basically like, if it passes the QC on iTunes, then it's good to go on the other platforms. So yeah, we failed a couple times trying to get that sound mix ready, but we got it, and it's out.
That's normal.
Yeah.
Hey, we have 2,000 people watching live on YouTube, X, and Rumble. We have a lot of questions. You want to take some questions from the audience?
Sure.
Well, this is a comment. Alan, I'm going to go through these.
Yeah. From Garfield's Bizarre Adventure for 5, bearded Chris greater than babyface Chris.
Well, there you
go. From let's see, from Magna Defender 98 for 10. Thank you. Iger's favorite excuse for his failures is cool, even into 2024.
No, Coof. Wait, let's save that comment for later. That's not a question for Chris.
I know.
Here we go, right here. I'm sorry.
Okay,
I'm sorry, Chris.
Question for you from Solomon Thornton. Sir Christopher, love horror comedies. Looking forward to seeing it. Any advice for beginning filmmakers?
Advice for beginning filmmakers. All right. I used to make this mistake all the time, and I still see beginning filmmakers make this mistake. Don't spend so much time worrying about your camera or your lenses or your cinematography. Put all of that effort into writing the best screenplay that you can write. So again, when I was starting out, it was like, I need to get this camera, I need to get this lens, I have to have this level of production value. All that is good and important, but if everybody spent the amount of time that they spend on production value, if they took that same energy and time and invested it into really learning how to break down a script beat by beat, what marks you need to hit, when's your inciting incident, what kind of, how does the resolution pay off? Spend as much time as you can really getting the that screenplay as best you can. And then I would also say, don't try to make a movie that you think the masses will like, because you're not going to please everybody. Just make the movie that you want to see. So if you were seeing a trailer before a movie in a theater, make the movie that when they make the trailer for that movie, that makes you go, yeah, I want to see that movie.
Mm-hmm. All right. From Caveat Ties over on Rumble, who did you use for distribution? I think you talked about
Gravitas Ventures. Yep.
And
again,
anyone,
I met them through a sales agent.
And anyone can approach them. You can just look up their website. You can approach Gravitas.
Mm-hmm.
And other companies like Indie Rights, or there's many out there for indie films like this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, Razorburn, question for Chris. Did you do any research such as exploring a haunted house or experience such paranormal activity?
Well, I hate to disappoint you. No, I didn't. We got lucky in finding an old house that kind of fit the bill. My research was really just being an avid horror movie fan, and what's going to scare me in a horror movie? What kind of things do I think are fun in a horror movie? Before we actually went into the house is so old, and apparently was a house that was used in the Civil War that would take in wounded soldiers. So a lot of soldiers actually died in this house. So when we went into the house, we did kind of have this talk of like, what if we experience some paranormal activity? What are we gonna do? And my kind of opinion was just like, I don't have time for that shit. But it was actually a very calm, pleasant house. Again, back to my earlier point, my research was just loving and watching a lot of horror movies.
Was the house located near you? Was it in your town?
It's about an hour. It's about an hour and 15 minutes away from me.
Oh, okay, so not too bad. Mm-hmm. From ADS, how did you settle on the runtime for the film? Did the final cut include everything that was in the initial shooting script?
Your second question first. Yeah, the final cut does include pretty much everything that's in the initial shooting script, except for a few lines. There's occasional lines that were taken out here and there. The running time is just shy of 2 hours, which was longer than I wanted it to be. The script is about 90 pages. But when we had that first rough cut done, I was like, oh man, this is almost 2 hours. This is longer than I wanted it to be. I really kind of decided that it would have hurt the film more to cut it down to a 90-minute mark than it would be to just leave it the way it is. The story makes more sense the way it is. Mm-hmm. And so, initially my plan was that this movie was going to be a 90-minute movie, and ended up being longer than that. And it was a choice to just kind of leave it as it is, because I do think the story functions better. You get more out of it. It makes more sense if it's left the way it is. That being said, that's a lesson I learned here. And the next script I write is going to be like 60 pages. Because the next one's going to be like an hour and 15 flat.
Cool. You're going to make up for it. Yeah. Brock Samsonite, any tips on applying for film permits with the city?
Oh, just you can just email them. Depending on where you are, that they can be. Whenever I've been needed permits, everybody I've approached has been pretty amenable.
I would say on that too, like if you there are boards they want you to come to their city.
Yes.
They want you to come to
They'll
their
help
state.
you.
They'll give you
help
incentive.
you. Yeah, there's incentives. So it's really, they will roll out the red carpet. You're going to hire people to work on this movie in our city or state.
Yeah.
They lobby you. So they're very amenable. So take advantage of that.
Yeah, and we didn't film in LA. This was filmed in Maryland.
Right.
So I'm sure it's much harder in LA.
LA and New York. That's where you want to stay away from.
Yeah. But also there's a scene in the film about 15 minutes in where Mason, the main character, is walking through a park. And since it was just two of us, we just did that guerrilla style. It was a public space. It was just, he's wearing a lavalier. It was me with a gimbal. It just kind of, to anybody watching, it just looked like a couple of guys goofing off. It didn't look like a major film production, but
tell people you're an influencer.
Yeah, exactly.
This is for TikTok.
Yeah.
And then start dancing.
I tell people I was a student. If I had a police officer come up to me and say, "What are you doing?" I would say, "Oh, I'm a student at the university. We're just making a student short film." And they'd be like, "Okay."
Yes. Just say
I can't get away with that anymore, but
just say student film or TikTok, whatever. There you go.
Exactly. Yeah.
Professor Fear asks, "What were you working a day job while filming?"
Not filming. I'm a freelance cinematographer and videographer in my area. I'm in the Washington, D.C. area. So I work on commercials and wedding videos and things like that. So again, as a freelancer, it was easy to just take the 3 weeks off and just do that. Yeah.
All right. And Patrick Lear wants to know, what was the craft services like on a micro budget film? How do you feed people on a
good question? Good question. That's a tough thing to navigate. You find people who are really, really sweet and will make food for you. Or if you happen to know anybody whose mom is like a caterer or something, throw them a few $100s and they will come by with a week's worth of food, which happened. So on this production, my wife was gracious enough to send us with 5 days worth of food. And we stayed in the house that we were shooting. We actually slept there. And so in the kitchen, the fridge would just be full of food. So, we have sandwiches for lunch, and then for dinner, there'd be tonight's game plan is, this thing that we can put in the oven or heat up in the microwave. And then, one of the co-producers on the film, his mom made a big meal that lasted us a week, and we just stacked the fridge. And I think there was maybe 1 or 2 days where we just decided to order out or something like that. But again, find people who will be gracious enough to cook food for you and take as much with you as you can.
A happy crew. You got to have good food.
It's very important. Very important.
Yeah. All right. From a nerd far away, hail, Mr. Schrack. Is YouTube a good platform for getting an independent production scene, or is it better going straight for distribution?
I would say that depends. How big is your YouTube channel? If you have a YouTube channel with a lot of followers and you're already monetizing, I would say maybe just go through your YouTube channel. If your YouTube channel doesn't have that many followers, you don't have that big of a reach, try to go for distribution. You can also go for self-distribution, which I personally haven't done, but it was actually kind of the plan when we were first prepping for sale. That we were just like, let's just make it. We'll just do self-distribution, and I think you can go through an aggregator, like Film Hub. I think is an aggregator that's really popular these days. And again, I personally haven't done it, but from what I understand, it's easier than ever these days to get your film self-distributed, and you can get it on Tubi and Freevee and things like that, and you can get a lot of views that way. Yeah, so I would say it just depends on what you have at your disposal.
Right. And I would say, why not do both?
Sure.
If you get on as many different platforms, ways for people to see it as possible, do it.
Mm-hmm.
So
absolutely. I would also imagine no matter what you choose, you still have to promote. You have to go out there and hit the bricks and promote your film.
You do. Yeah. Well, I created a little Instagram page for the film, and we all put out big email blasts and got in touch with you guys and tried to get the movie reviewed as much as we can. So yeah, you do have to reach out, try to get some net. It's tough these days for a low budget, especially an ultra low budget film, to get a wide net, but just try to cast some net, and you'll get some people watching your film.
Chris, the movie is out now. For sale is on rental, purchase on VOD, everywhere. Any final thoughts or advice or things you want to say to our audience?
If the film sounds interesting to you, please check it out. It's on Amazon, it's on Apple TV, it's on cable VOD, and I just want to thank you guys for having me on. This was great.
Of course.
Absolutely.
All right, Chris, have a great weekend. Congrats on the movie. It's a huge accomplishment, and I wish you much success. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Cool. Take care. Later.
Bye.
Bye.